So welcome, everybody. I know that there's still people coming in. I'm going to ask the neighborhood officers to also join the group and be seated within the audience as well. You can sit at a table, you can sit in the audience. If you haven't had a chance to grab some food, please do so. The food is also there. Take care of yourself. And just a little housekeeping. If anyone needs the washroom, they're just around the corner, just to the left over there. So good evening, everyone. My name is Roseanne Bailey. I'm with Toronto Police Service. I am with the Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit. Thank you all for coming out on this really cold night. This is our last town hall for 2022 and looking forward to 2023. I just wanted to introduce two therapists that are in the room. If you can just stand up. I did that while they were putting their food in the mouth, so great opportunities. So thank you very much. And the therapists are here just in case anybody is feeling a bit of discomfort and would like to actually speak to somebody. We know these conversations are heavy and hard, and so part of the reason why we've asked to provide a bit of space and some safety for these brave conversations is to be able to have an open discussion, but also be able to support the community in this process as well. So I want to thank Scarborough Center for Healthy Communities for hosting us today, especially in their amazing space at the Hub. I'm going to introduce Shola.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Shola Alabi, and I am the Director for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion here at Scarborough Center for Healthy Communities. And I'm going to start this by reciting the land acknowledgement. For those who are not in the house, please take a moment to acknowledge the land you are standing in, wherever you are watching us from. And I would like to start by honoring the land that we're on here at the Hub, which has been the site of human activity since time immemorial. It is the traditional territories of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and most recently, the Mississauga of the Credit River First Nations. Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and other agreements, and is home to many indigenous nations from across Turtle Island, including the Inuit and the Métis. These treaties and other agreements, including the One Dish with One Spoon, One Pour Belt Covenant, are agreements to peaceably share and care for the land and its resources. Other indigenous nations, European and newcomers, were invited into this covenant in the spirit of respect, peace, and friendship. We're all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, newcomers in this generation or generation past. We are mindful of broken covenants, and we strive to make this right with the land and with each other. I would also like to acknowledge those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. And so I honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. In closing, I, as an immigrant from Nigeria, West Africa, I recognize that indigenous sovereignty is linked to our collective liberation. And therefore, I'd like to plead that we all continue to reflect on ways that we can mobilize and take action in solidarity with the indigenous people and also with everyone in the community of color to deconstruct racism and oppression. We can all do this. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Charanjit Singh. I'm the Community Wellness and Engagement Manager with Scarborough Center for Healthy Communities. I also oversee the Hub Mid Scarborough, and I want to welcome everyone to this space. The conversations that we're going to have today are very important, and we want to make sure that we continue these conversations. The Hub has a lot of community different engagement programs and services and events. So you're welcome to get in touch with our staff up at the Hub reception. I'll be hanging around here as well to ensure we continue these conversations. We want to have strong, healthy, vital communities, and that's how we can promote inclusive equity and inclusion. So please feel free to connect with me and our staff. Thank you and welcome.
Good morning. My name is Claudia McCoy. I am the founder of Upsurgence, which is a firm that works with organizations and institutions to close connectivity gaps with their community stakeholders. I want to welcome you here today on a really cold Wednesday. Thank you for braving the elements, for coming out. I am your facilitator today. And the purpose of today's meeting and our coming together in collaboration is to inform and to listen to your insights, your experience, your needs, and with the overarching theme of race-based data collection and the strategy of moving towards equity. For those of you that are online, welcome. Please know that we welcome your questions by just placing them in the chat. There will be someone who will actually come to the mics. With that being said, after we have our presentation, we will have questions. The questions you can, there are two mics. The mic at the back, I don't believe is on camera. So if you're a little shy, you can do that one. But we will definitely would like to hear from you on the mic because we can, the people online can actually hear you. I introduced myself as Claudia McCoy. And today we have guests, people who have done a lot of work in the community from TPS and from 41 and 43 Division. And so I would love for introductions, starting with my.
Good evening, everyone. So pleased to see you all here today. Super excited. This is our last one for 2022. And like Roseanne said, looking forward to 2023. We have a few more. So thank you for coming out. My name is Mai Fan, and I am the Equity Data Scientist at the Toronto Police Service, part of the Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit. I work with an amazing team in Equity, Inclusion, Human Rights, including Roseanne, to drive the race and identity-based data collection strategy. This work is very important to the service. It's very important to the communities, and something that communities and community leaders have been asking for a long time. So very, very pleased to be here to go over what we found, what we're doing about it, and yeah. Thank you for being here and having this discussion with us.
Just walk right in. Hi, it's Inspector James Hung from 41 Division. So this hub is in our division. It's in our catchment area, and been a police officer for 35 years and been assigned to 41 Division here for the last 2 years. So.
Hi, I'm Warren Wilson. I'm also from, thanks Dave, also from 41 Division. And superintendent there, been there a couple of years. I've been with Toronto Police for over 36 years. This is a great opportunity, and I'm really happy to be here tonight, ready to roll up my sleeves Some of our partners in the room we do great work with already, but I'm really excited to hear from people that have come out tonight, how we can do better and things we can do. I was born and raised right here in this part of Scarborough. I lived here for 30 years in this division, a kilometer that way and then a kilometer that way and then about a kilometer that way. So I am invested here. I'm not here alone. You've met Inspector Hung. We have a number of officers from our neighborhood program who are here tonight, who you may already know. I see some of them there, Allison and Tara, and I think Courtney back there, and Sergeant Mike Da Silva and Curtis Ducey are here. So we're all here, and we want to be part of this, and I just look forward to tonight. Thanks.
Good evening. Oh, is that going? Good evening, everybody. Superintendent Dave Ridzik. I'm in charge of 43 Division. And like Warren, and we are proud Scarboroughans, born and raised here. Graduated David and Mary Thompson, right there with this young man. Many years apart, obviously, but like Warren said, I'm a very proud Scarboroughan. I grew up just down the street, Midland and Lawrence area. Brimley and Lawrence area around Thompson Park, went to Dave and Mary Thompson, and very invested in this community. My mother still lives in the house that we grew up in. My brother lives just over by Scarborough General Hospital with his family. His kids went to school in this community. So it's important. It's personal to us, the safety of Scarborough and in particular our divisions. We do have some of our neighborhood officers here from 43 Division. I don't know where the table is that they put them on. I think it's just out in the lobby there, but we have a map drawn up here of our division with all of our neighborhoods broken down, as well as the neighborhoods that have neighborhood officers and all of their contact information if there is anybody here that is from 43 Division. Prior to coming to 43, I've been here about 2.5 years now. I ran a unit called Community Partnerships and Engagement, and the name kind of denotes what we did. We were working with the community on partnerships and engagement. And I think I know half of the people in this room through my years of working there and over the years in collaboration. We've got people here from our Black Consultative Committee, from our Chiefs Youth Advisory Council, and just some people from different organizations and our CPLCs that I've met over the years. So it's good to see all of you here. Like Warren said, these are very important conversations, and conversations that I've been having for a year. I've been in the community space for probably almost 20 years now in my career. And I'm glad to see that, you know, we have listened. That's where some of this race-based data collection has come from. But we obviously haven't listened enough, and we're here to listen tonight. And we do really want to hear from you. We want to have those questions. We want to have those discussions, not necessarily even in the formal setting here, but have those sidebar discussions afterwards, and to continue those relationships and conversations beyond tonight. That's why we've got all our information here that we can exchange. And I really look forward to the conversation and hearing from everybody here. So thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Roger Crutchlow, and I'm an inspector at 43 Division. I work with Superintendent Dave Ridzik, and I'm ecstatic to be here. I am a Scarborough kid as well. Not born, but certainly bred. I see some of my friends smiling and everything from where we are. Back in the day going to high school in here, and this used to be a fitness center, actually. Back in the day, I forget the name of the gym that was here, but we used to hang out here all the time, mid-Scarborough and all the programs, and being here with the community itself this has been going on for years, but it's nice to see that it's out in the open now. We can have all these conversations and with everybody, so I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for coming out to share your views. It's very, very important to us to hear what these views are, and we cannot do it alone. And it's very important that you're here and that we're here and we walk this road together. Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all for your service. It is tonight we're going to go into some complex narratives. Again, in some places difficult, and so again I want to remind everyone there are 2 therapists here. If there are things that you want to talk through, and we believe that talking and communicating, collaborating with each other is a pathway to healing. We have 2 therapists in the back. This is the 5th? Wow. We had various different conversations in the previous ones that focus a lot on what is data? What does it mean? What does it mean to the community? What's the power dynamic around the acquisition of data? What does it mean to create a strategy with the use of data in the context of wanting to develop and deliver more equitable services? So this part of the presentation we're going to go into in depth. I believe, Mai, you're going to be starting to talk about what does data look like from the TPS standpoint, how it's collected, how it's received, how communications with the community begins and ends. Mai, the floor is yours.
Okay, before we go into that, I just want to give some space for Superintendents Ridzik, Dave, and Superintendent Warren Wilson to just ground us on a little bit of why we're here and what this means for the service going forward.
I mean, this is something that's been talked about, talked to us for many, many years, in fact, decades. I think that it's important for us to acknowledge that we haven't listened, we haven't responded, we haven't looked at how we do things, and we haven't recognized some of the pain and some of the real trauma that we've been causing for a very long time. So I think in 2019, this process by the province to collect data, which has started with data tracked through our use of force reporting, has given us something to really, a narrative really to start talking about what do the numbers tell us and what are we learning. And I think Dr. Pham's going to get into that a little bit, but for us as an organization, I think having that in front of you is important, and I don't think real change can happen until we have something that we've been measuring. So there's different pieces to this whole subject, but the data is important, and the chief acknowledged in June when that report came out, which had the results of that collection of use of force data, and acknowledged that we haven't been doing well and apologized on behalf of the organization. And that's led to some, how are we going to now move forward? And there were 38 action items that came out of that, and I think this is kind of part of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we've been, like I said, I've been in this community space, working in the community space for a good part of 20 years now, in different divisions throughout the city, and then corporately looking after it for the entire service. These are difficult conversations. These are topics that members of our community have talked about, whether it's the representation of force and that. I've heard and had some really heartfelt conversations with folks in regards, but we couldn't ever substantiate it. And I think this is the very first step in which we've begun that, and it's a sensitive topic, right? It's a sensitive topic, the collection of data. And we wanted to get it right. And although the province came out with the change where we had to collect this data, we wanted to get it right here in Toronto. So a lot of thought, a lot of consultation went into how do we do this respectfully and thoughtfully, but it's an important thing to do, because without the data, and I'm no data specialist by any means, that's why we've got Dr. Phan here to go through some of these things. Data is important, but also the context of data is important as well. We own it, though. We own it. The data does not lie. There is a higher likelihood, and Dr. Phan will get into this, that force may be used on a person of color or an Indigenous person. We own that, and that's why the chief apologized back in June, and it's important that we acknowledge that. So like I said, I've had many of these discussions over the years, and I'm looking forward to having those discussions today, now that we do have some data that we can look at, analyze, to move forward from. And it doesn't end here. I think, Dr. Fayed, you're going to get into that as well. This is just the first stage of it. There's going to be further collection of race-based data moving forward in other aspects outside of strip searches and use of force. So once again, looking forward to the hearing from all of you here today and the conversations to follow.
Yeah, and we can't do this alone, right? Data work, equity work needs a collaborative approach that involves people with lived experiences of policing, but also involves our members, involving frontline officers to really understand the jobs that they have to do in the context and situations that they do their work, and together putting the pieces of the picture together so that we can have a complete understanding of what happens and how we can really drive the outcomes that we want to see, which is better treatment, more equitable treatment while we respond to community safety needs. And so when we started this work in 2019, we knew that this cannot be a police-driven effort. It has to involve communities along the way. And that began with first series of town halls in 2019 to really ask the community, what do you think about police collecting race and identity-based data? What concerns do you have about that? How do you want to see that data protected? How do you want to see that data used? And what are the important priority areas that you want to see police to start reporting and being transparent and accountable for the outcomes that will come out of it? And so from that work, we published a Communities Voice report that's on our website. We really continue that engagement, not just with diverse members of communities, but also we had put together a community advisory panel made up of diverse members of communities with backgrounds in mental health, in social services, and with an in-depth understanding of research and policy to guide us and to work with us every step of the way. We also worked with our members. We had RBDC, we call them liaisons, in every division, who could also inform us of how police operations and procedures, it looks one way on paper, but how does it actually play out in complex dynamics, right? What are some of the factors and drivers and experiences that might help us to interpret the findings in a way that helps us to identify where change can be made and how we can improve the way we do things and how we can improve how we support officers to do better when they respond to community safety needs. And so that means working with the committees that are in the service, including PACER, the Anti-Racism Advisory Panel, the board committees, as well as our community consultative committees like the BCC, who are members. Some members are here, and we've really reached out to following the first town hall and make sure that going forward we have a more engaged process, an even more engaged process. And so we want to involve you along the way in a better way, and having more of these town halls so that you can be informed of what's happening and give input into how race and identity-based data collection strategy unfolds. Because we want to see the communities really benefiting from this project. So one of the first things we heard from our community advisory panel, I think one member is here, Paula? Hi. One of the first things they told us was that you need to start with being clear and transparent about how does policing work. Really show us and map out the realities of policing, because not very many people understand the complexities, right, of policing. And so this map is kind of an illustration of how most people think of policing, right? It starts with a 911 call, then officer arrives on the scene, they'll ask questions, investigate what's happening, they'll make a decision to arrest someone or not, right? And a decision to charge or not. And then off that person goes into the criminal justice process, or they are released. In reality, policing is so much more complex than that, right? There's many, many ways that police officers can come into a situation and be called to help manage a community or a public safety concern. It's not just a 911 call, right? It could be a traffic stop, could be a pedestrian stop. It could be an officer is flagged down by a member of the community as they're walking the beat. Or it could be a call from a probation office, right? Some of the sector partners, the schools could call officers, to a situation. So there's so many different ways that can bring police into a situation. And then once an officer comes on the scene, there's so many different kinds of outcomes. There's on and off ramps that are available, right? An officer could decide to refer someone who needs help to a social service. They could divert them through the mental health process, right? They could also, investigate a situation and, decide that an arrest is appropriate or a charge, and then it goes down the line here, through booking, through the court system. And so when we started the race and identity-based data collection strategy, it was to address the priority areas that the public had already told us was a primary concern, critical concern, and that was concerns about unfair treatment and use of force and unfair treatment in strip searches, right? That was why the province mandated all police services to start collecting race and identity-based data in use of force reports. So that was a legally required mandate. And the police service recognized that we also need to start looking at strip searches. There was a report by the province that showed some concerns around how policing in Ontario was conducting strip searches. It was not transparent, and they were concerned that there were also racially disparate outcomes when it comes to strip searches. But no one was collecting data, so we didn't know. We didn't know until it became a court case, and by then it was too late, right? We needed to be more proactive about it. And so we took into account and got direction to include strip searches under the strategy. So that's what we did. Starting in January 1st, 2020, we started to collect officer perception of a person's race in all use of force incidents that were mandated for reporting to the province. So that's two pieces there. What do we mean by officer perception of race? And why are we doing it that way? And then secondly, what is a use of force incident? So I'll start with officer perceived race. That's the officer's best estimate or guess as to the race of the person they are using force on. It's based on their observation of the person, the way they look, the way they're dressed. And the reason why the province mandated officer perception is that they wanted to know and capture whether perception informed the decision to use force or not. That is critical for understanding if there were implicit biases at play in that decision making, right? So I get asked a lot, isn't that not accurate? What if the officer gets it wrong? That person doesn't identify with that category. And it really doesn't matter if the officer is accurate or not, right? If the officer's perception somehow influenced their decision to use force, it's based on the information the officer had at the time, right? So that's what we really wanted to know. And the use of force incidents that where a report is required includes all incidents where an officer uses a physical force, so that's a punch or a kick or any physical force that results in medical attention. That means an ambulance has to be called to the scene to attend to the person for treatment, or a nurse or a doctor, right? Person's taken to the hospital as a result of that use of force. It's also every incident where an officer uses a firearm or a taser. Everyone here knows what a taser is? Yeah? So anytime they pull out a taser or a handgun, points it or discharges it, and every time an officer uses any other kind of weapon, including a baton or a pepper spray or even a police service dog that comes into contact with the person, right? So we looked at all of those incidents, and every time that happens, an officer has to submit a use of force report, and they have to indicate the race of the person who they use force on in every incident. And for the use of weapons, like firearms, tasers, and other types of weapons, a report has to be submitted regardless of the level of injury, okay? There could be no injury, but because they used a service weapon, they have to submit a report. So what did we find? We found, first of all, that different groups of people by race were more or less likely to have an interaction with the police in the first place, okay? So there are some groups, like Black people and Middle Eastern people, they were more likely to have an enforcement interaction with police. So that's, any interaction with police that involves an arrest, a ticket, a serious offense ticket, identified as a subject or a suspect in an incident, a mental health apprehension, a diversion, right? Those kinds of things. Indigenous people were also more likely to have enforcement interactions with police. But other groups like Latino, East Asian, Southeast Asian, South Asian, and white people were less likely to have an interaction with police in the first place relative to their proportion in the city. But what happens once an interaction with an officer occurs? Well, we found another pattern. We found that some groups, when they have an interaction with officers, were more likely to have a use of force, right? So Black people, Middle Eastern, and Latino people were more likely to have an interaction, a use of force when there was an interaction with police, and also East and Southeast Asian people. For Indigenous people, they were less likely to have an interaction, a use of force when there was a police interaction, and same with South Asian and white people. So this over-representation in use of force when there was an interaction with police was really, helped us to identify how we show up to a scene and what we do to bring a situation under control. And it gave us an opportunity to really look at how we de-escalate a situation or fail to de-escalate a situation without using force. The analysis in the report, I'm not going to take you through it, but you'll see some of the charts back here that we looked at it even further, right? We looked at, well, what type of situation was it? Like, what kind of 911 call for service was it? And we found in different types of situations, there were over-representations in use of force if it involved a Black person. And we also looked at the offense type, like what kind of offense was involved in the incident, and we found even there that there were certain, when we looked at, for example, all weapons-related offenses and drug-related offenses, actually in those situations, there was no over-representation of use of force when it involved Black people, but for everything else there was, including mental health-related incidents. So by looking at our data and looking at those nuances, it really allowed us to zero in on the types of situations where we need to really unpack how are we making use of force decisions and how can we train officers better to deal with those situations so that we can address the over-representation and use of force, particularly for mental health, right? We are seeing that in our data. For strip searches, it was a different story. And strip searches was really unique as well in that we had a major policy change that occurred in 2020, which was when we started collecting this data. In October, the service did a review of the search of persons policy and procedure and revamped it, right? Tightened it up, made it more clear when a strip search can and should occur or can occur and when it cannot. Right, and it also boosted training for officers. And so we can see the results of that policy change had a real effect on strip search numbers overall, right? So after October, after the policy change, only 5% of arrests resulted in a strip search. But prior to that, almost 27% of arrests resulted in a strip search. So we went from 27% down to 5%. So policy change really made a difference. And that is heartening, right? That means that there are things we can do. Not only that, but we found that when we made the policy change, it also reduced the overrepresentation in strip searches that we saw for Indigenous people. It went from an overrepresentation of Indigenous people arrested were 30% more likely to be strip searched, down to no overrepresentation after the policy change. So when we had clear instruction and direction for our officers, it really helped to drive down the disparities. We still see a small disparity for Black and white people arrested in strip searches, and so there's more work to be done, right? We need to understand what's happening there and how can we improve the way we make strip search decisions so that we can address those disparities there. But I just gave you a really quick drive-by of, run through of the complex analysis that we did. All of this analysis and the data are on our website and available to open data. So that means the data is now available to communities to really look at and analyze for yourselves to answer your questions, right? This is the power of data and being transparent so that you can help us look at the data through your lens and tell us, some of the unique insights that you are seeing in the data as well, and not just relying on our analysis. So I'll turn it back to the superintendents there to speak about the changes that we identified.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just add on to what you were saying about particularly the strip search policy that came in. I'll tell you, there was a lot of resistance internally to that policy change. When people are brought into a police facility, there's a possibility they could be released. There's also a possibility they could be staying at the station, and then they could end up in the system as they wait to go to court. So, officers and people responsible for the safety of those people, for themselves, for the future people they'll encounter, would look at things and justify the reason to do a search. And that's kind of how we did things for a long time. And not everybody got strip searched, but resistance and when people challenge things, I like that because it shows we're actually doing something and people are being made to do things differently. And I can tell you now that we're into this for a bit, we aren't having a lot of instances where people are being injured and people are smuggling things in. It's not happening like we always thought it would happen, but it's not. So, we're trying. We're doing things. It's a good example of something that's working. Do you want me to go through some of these things?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So we mentioned these 38 action items that we did. A lot of it's, I think, some of it's right here. There's a great board with it, but a lot of it's kind of broken into some different categories here. So I'll just go through some of them. If you have questions, ask questions. Listening, understanding, we've talked a lot about that, but meeting with Black, Indigenous, racialized communities, that's so key to this, and this is kind of part of what we're doing today. Monitoring. One of the things here is change officer performance reporting to include more community service. So our evaluation system of work performance for members and for police officers is the same as it's been since I can remember. And it doesn't evaluate enough about interactions, collaboration, partnership building, working in the community. So those are things that are being changed. It's more focused, a lot of it's focused, well, I won't say a lot, but there is a big piece of it that's enforcement driven. And we look at as an officer doing their job because they're writing a lot of tickets enforcing the Highway Traffic Act. Are they seizing liquor? Are they making arrests? Are they getting source information? Those are important and have a role, but we don't have enough about the changing how we evaluate someone doing a good job by the community work, which really, I think, we've learned is the most important work that we have our folks out there, and you see a lot of it with our neighborhood officers. It's great. Procedures, workflow. Yeah, you want to do some?
I'll just touch on the community stuff that Warren finished off with there as well, back at monitoring. It's easy for us to measure enforcement. How many arrests did you make? How many tickets did you write? And we've done that for years. Very, very difficult to measure that engagement piece. And I know with, and unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, our CIO, Colin Stairs, is working very, very hard on coming up with the technology piece that can help capture that. Again, Warren talked about the neighborhood community officer program, and I'm glad we've got so many of them here today, and hopefully you know some of them. They are really leading the charge organizationally within our divisions of changing some of that culture. And really you can change culture, because Warren touched on it about the strip searches and that. That community engagement, I'm a firm believer in this, that the community engagement, okay, and positive community interactions is going to solve a lot of crime. There's a lot of upstream issues that lead people down the pathway where they have contact with police that we really don't own, right? Whether it's the mental health system that has failed somebody, whether it's systemic racism or poverty, things like that, that put them in a position where they have an interaction with the police. But what we do own for us is that interaction, right? And if we can do that better, and we know we can, because we got living proof of our neighborhood officers here go out there and do it every single day, then that's going to make us a better service. And that neighborhood community officer program is shaped and has been shaped by the community. There was years and years of studies done by Humber to get it to where it is today, and we're going to continue to invest in that. I know the chief has actually realigned some of our resources to expand the neighborhood officer program into other communities. But the reality is, when I used to oversee it, I told the chief, I said, it's a big gamble. I said, but to make this work, if you could put 4 neighborhood officers in every single City of Toronto neighborhood, you won't see it immediately, but in 5 years you'll see the difference. We're getting there. I think we're in 58 neighborhoods of the 158 neighborhoods in the City of Toronto. But we are getting there, and I think we're going to continue to invest in that. Procedures and workflow. So we talked about use of force incidents, and if you look around, most of our officers here should have them on, but body-worn cameras. That is a huge accountability piece as well. We've always had them in most of our cars, but we've moved to the body-worn cameras in the last few years. For Scarborough, we were the last ones to get them. They went from west to east, but we haven't had them very long. But they're an amazing tool for us. And again, it's an accountability piece. And when we're talking about use of force, it is now mandatory for our supervisors, okay, and all the way up to the superintendent, we must review the body-worn camera for every use of force incident report that goes in. We never had that ability to do that before, right? The report got filled out, we'd read it, but there was no video to watch unless it was an in-car camera, but now every single one of them is captured on video. So that's helping us be able to monitor officers' actions, and if they did act inappropriate, then we can respond to that as well. Again, the mandatory supervisor debriefs now as well of use of force incidents. So every time a use of force incident occurs, a supervisor is going to sit with that officer and talk about what occurred, perhaps what they could have done better, and look at that as well. I might get this wrong, but we're also going to be looking at a tool and a mechanism. We have right now, with use of force incidents, we have, if an officer is involved in more than 3 use of force incidents in a select period of time, it triggers a mandatory review. And Maya, correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking at, I think Colin is looking at doing something that in regards to the race-based data piece with interactions, or no? Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, we're really looking. We've heard from communities and our committees and various stakeholders that we've engaged with about their concerns of how can we really support officers through our early risk intervention, so that and we do have processes in place for that, but there's always room for improvement, right? So how can we tighten that up? How can we improve it and support officers who may need mental health and wellness supports, so that they can, we can equip them to better handle high stress, dynamic, dangerous situations in a way that ends up with a good resolution for everyone.
Like with use of force reports, it doesn't just get submitted. It goes through so many layers of eyes looking at it, and I think we're expanding that now too. I think we're going to have a use of force committee at the superintendent level across the service that looks at all these as well. But when it comes into the station, if an officer submits that report, the supervisor's going to look at it. I already talked about the debrief. They're going to look at the in-car camera as well as the body-worn camera footage of it. Our unit complaint coordinator, who looks after all the internal and external complaints at the unit level that comes in, is going to look at it. It's then going to go to Roger or James for them to have a look at it. It's going to then come to me or Warren to have a look at it. That's happening now, and it has been happening. But now we're talking about adding another layer at the command level, having a superintendent sit out a committee of superintendents to review all these use of force as well. Just as another layer of transparency, another layer of eyes looking at it for perhaps ways in which we could have done things better. So that's coming as well. These are all changes that have occurred in the last couple of years.
We had a problem, I don't know, 20 years ago with police pursuits. We had a lot of pursuits, people being chased, and they were ending really tragically. And we took a really hard look at our process. Again, we go back to governance, process, build in accountability, training. And that's what happened there. And it really had a good effect, and we had fewer. So one of the things we do now, if an officer gets involved in a pursuit, they fill out a report. We report on everything. That's what we do. They fill out a report. And then they'll go through the video of the in-car camera with a supervisor, much like we're doing now with the use of force reporting. And the opportunity for the officer to sit there and look at what their actions were, what they did, versus what they wrote when they perceived what they did in their recollection immediately was, I did this, I turned here, there was some people here, there was a light here, a red, whatever that was. It's amazing to see when they actually watch the video of what they did and how they, in some cases fell into this tunnel vision, and they missed things they should not have been pursuing in that situation. But they didn't see it when it was happening, and they didn't even see it when they were immediately asked about it after, about what to do and to report it. So there's, to me, a real opportunity to sit down when someone now uses force, fills out a use of force report, and have that conversation with a supervisor with the advantage now of viewing the video to ask questions. Say, hey, okay, that's what you did. Why'd you feel that? Because as we said, it's about perception. That's the use of force. Their response is based on what they perceived the person had or what they were doing. So it's a very different conversation now when you have that opportunity to view the actual actions and ask questions. And these questions can be about, was the fact this person was black? Did that have any impact on how you reacted? And people can now think internally and look, and maybe, doing this process, like I personally saw change with the pursuits, will have an effect, and I think people will learn and be more informed and aware of their actions and likely their biases too, and how they respond. So I'm a huge advocate for accountability. I mean, we can change rules and governance, but unless we put in steps where there's oversight and people are being asked questions and reporting, it doesn't work. So that is happening with this part of that document, which is excellent. Training is always important. For how we do things. And I can tell you, we do a lot of training for our frontline folks and for our senior leaders as well. We've always done that. There's annual training, there's mandatory training that's done throughout the year. And we've hit all these things, and we're quite responsive to things that are happening as officers are out there doing their work. and like whether it's de-escalation, people in crisis, anti-black, all this stuff gets built into our training, and we do it, and people go to the training and they're learning, and we're getting better. But training is something, you know, I've always felt the service has really invested in, and I think it's a really important thing. So training is part of this. We're going into adverse childhood experience training for all officers, the impact that people have had and young people are having with trauma in their life, how that can affect them, and just that awareness and knowledge for officers is really important. That's something we're looking at rolling out as well. So coach officer, do you want to talk about coach officer?
Yeah, I mean, in the past, a lot of our training dealt with, you know, the practical side of policing and didn't involve a lot of the community or community relationships, partnerships type side of things. And we've changed that over the years, and we're getting better at it. And I mean, I don't know if there's anybody here from the BCC. Swabir's here from our Chiefs Youth Advisory Council, but we're actually including members of the community in the development of our training. We've added an equity inclusion specialist at our college that we've hired that works right there. I think a couple of them now that look at all of our training with that equity lens. And I can tell you that it's making a difference. Having those voices from the community in the college with our officers talking about their lived experiences is very impactful. It's very impactful. That's something we never did before. And we've learned after having listened to the community that that's very, very important. We've done it as well in our dealing with our mental health training as well. We've got people coming in that have lived experience to talk about their interactions with the police in the past. Some were really good, some were not so good. But we're I guess, infusing all of that into every single bit of training that we do. So those equity and inclusion experts at the college, I don't care if it's a course on Highway Traffic Act enforcement, there's an equity and inclusion lens that is adding to that, right? Which is extremely important. And I think the training, I mean, we talk about training at our college all the time, but at our own divisions, training occurs informally every single day. These are discussions that we have every single day with our folks, whether it's Roger on parade or myself or those at evaluations and things like that. I can talk for myself, and I know Warren and James and Roger are the same. We're very community oriented, and that's important to us. It's important to change the culture, and until you change that culture, things aren't going to happen. And it starts from the top. We lead and we give that direction, and if it's important to us, it'll be important to them. And I can tell you, no bones about it, it's extremely important to us that that engagement with the community leads the way with our officers. And again, our right down to our neighborhood community officers coming on parade and talking about their experiences. It's growing, okay? That culture is changing. I'm amazed. I got 33 years on the job now, and where we were and where we are now, and I've especially in the last probably 7 to 8 years, I'm very impressed with the improvements we've made, but we still got a long way to go. No bones about it. We still have a long way to go, and that's where I think a lot of the voices of the community come into this, because we do need to hear your experiences, and we take that information, and it makes us better. Okay, so like we don't want that, you know, the silent majority out there. We want the vocal majority to come forward and tell us what we've done wrong, what you think we're doing wrong, where our priorities should be, and how can we do things better. That's why engagements like this are so important.
I guess that's a really good segue into asking questions.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like we're doing everything so great, so why are we even
I
here?
know.
Like, we have a problem, we are here, so we need to hear real honest feedback on what we are doing things, but we're not doing enough, and we're not doing it well enough.
Again, there are 2 microphones if you have any questions around race-based data or any concerns that you have regarding policing in your community. Please come to the mic. While you, just. Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, I guess I have to start something here because nobody wants to start anything. My name is Warwick Russell. I'm living in Scarborough for 35 years. and a mandatory mediator at Superior Court of Justice. In about 2020, early 2020, I wanted to make a report at 41 Division. I live in 41 Division area, and it was interesting how the report went, because the detective who was handling the report, he asked me a question that I was able to say to him, I knew what he was doing. He was investigating me instead of following through the report. And the reason I knew this was there was a past telephone that I had some years ago, and it was, he wanted to know more about that telephone. It was interesting. He was not interested to know the whatever the activities were, but and so when I brought up to him that he was, rather than responding to the investigation, he was investigating me, and he says, no, I wasn't doing it. But I just want him to know that I understood what he was doing. Now, there are many people in our community that from time to time they would say, look, I won't go to the police because the police is going to be passing the information to other people. People have complained, and the next couple of weeks or time down the line, the next person who they complained against knew that this happened and knew exactly who did it. So something is wrong. Something is wrong. I know there's a lot of things I want to talk about. So that addresses my issue of the perception as a black person going inside there, that a perception is formed about me already before I even start to present my scenario. In the particular case I was dealing with, the officer was able to come around, and we went to court with everything, and we were able to get the conviction that was required. And that was because I diligently did what I had to do as a community member with an understanding of the system. Now, with regards to this whole idea of perception, I'm waiting to hear from the officers about recruitment, because you can bring the horse to the pond, but you can't force the horse to drink. So when you recruit at the very beginning, what knowledge does these young officers coming in have about what should be done in the area of race relations, of equity? And by the way, the other area that interests me very much is disability issues. Is there a clear understanding what are the needs of disability issues? What do you do? The case that I brought forward to the 41 Division Court had something to do with disability. No one understood it. We went through the whole process, and it hasn't been understood. I've laid it in writing to the powers that may be, and sometimes we'll hear about it because there's going to be a review. So the thing is, the whole idea of community involvement and community wanting to be involved with the police, it's there. People want to genuinely be involved. But if you have a perception of me and you're going to investigate me before you decide to proceed the way you should, then it's difficult. For me personally, I'm a member of I'm on the roster of Superior Court of Justice. I was chair of the panel for the City of Toronto Committee of Adjustment. So I have nothing to worry about. But the fact is, how do you get around these things? How do you get around it from the very beginning, from the time of recruitment. Officers coming in, young people coming into the force should be knowledgeable of these areas because you can't change them. You can train like hell. But at the end of the day, that person has that internal feeling. So now that I get you started.
Well, thank you so much. There's a lot to unpack there. There was about 3 or 4 things. And before you completely walk away, I want to make sure that I'm clear. Yesterday we had the privilege of speaking with youths, and one of the questions that came up to the table was around. I asked how many of you felt safe asking for help with police officers, and many of them did not feel safe. Yeah. So the safety narrative that you're talking about, I think, is one that we can address or talk about and think about. How do we? It seems safety on the police side was one of the narratives around strip search. I think you mentioned that, and yet the community is saying we want to feel safe when we engage. So that's one narrative. I think the other thing that you mentioned was around privacy. Who owns the data that is being generated by the community? Who gets to share it and when? That's a power dynamic. And I think the third piece that you were talking about was looking at recruitment. Looking at local, are we having local people that understand local issues? Looking at people who actually identify with the communities that do not feel safe to communicate and interact with the police, that feel over policed and underprotected. I think those are the 3 questions and narratives that you were bringing forth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I think I'm just going to start on a couple of these things. The hiring.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. I'm trying to answer your questions here as best I can. You talked about the hiring piece, right? And I agree with you. That is something that we have changed in our recruitment process. Our recruitment process has expanded quite a bit from what it used to be. And Roseanne is here, and Roseanne, I might get some of this wrong because I'm not at our talent acquisition or our HR folks there hiring. But I do sit on the Constable Selection Review Committee, which is an added layer that they've never done before. But there are so many different things they're looking at now when they're hiring about lived experience. They're looking at, they actually have to write some of an essay or something on their community experiences, why they want to be a police officer, what volunteer work have they done in the community. We look at, when it comes to the Selection Review Committee, we look at what ties do they have to the community here. What type of volunteer work did they do? Did they just start doing it 2 weeks ago because they applied, or have they been doing it for years, right? We notice these things. We look at the diversity, right? We look at, are they going to be reflective of the community that they're going to be serving? Okay, those are all things we never really looked at before. So we have added that in to make sure that we're trying to get the best candidate with the best lived experiences that are going to be, serving our communities out there, right? You talked about disabilities. I don't want to get into what disability it is. We recognize that. So we have, I think, 12 Chiefs Consultative Committees now. We used to have about 9. We've added to that. I'm the chair of the Chiefs Youth Advisory Council. We also have a Disabilities Committee because we recognized, and again, why did we recognize? Because we made a boo-boo. We made a mistake. It was an individual that I believe that went in to complain downtown, if I'm getting this right, at 51 Division, who had a seeing eye dog, okay, that was refused a taxi service. Our officers at 51 Division, I think it was back in 2019, didn't have, like you said, a good understanding of disability rights and things like that. They made the wrong call. There was an offense that was committed there, and they didn't recognize it. That, of course, became a complaint, and we're glad that that person did complain, that our inaction, okay, to address their complaint and their issue that day wasn't looked after. We actually have a Seniors and Disabilities Committee now, and so we've got experts in the field. We've got lawyers on there that are experts in disability law and senior law. We've got representatives from all kinds of different agencies, March of Dimes, from John Howard Society, all that on the committee as well, to kind of guide us and shape us. And out of that came a lot of training. I know you said training has to start at the beginning, but I think any training is good training. And they went on a tour across the city and spoke to every single division in the city and delivered material, and it was online as well, about all of the issues and laws surrounding those that are that have disabilities. And I can say that we have not had an incident such as that has come forward since then. Is it perfect? No. Can we get better? Absolutely. But it's a start. And like I said, those committees do engage with our officers and do make a difference in the way in which we deliver those services to the community. You talked about, you made a complaint, and 2 weeks later, the person who you were complaining about knew who had called, right? Sometimes those are sensitive issues and difficult for us to explain to the community and understand the rule of law. Sometimes people just want to come forward and give us information, and they want something done about it, but they want to get involved. The unfortunate thing is sometimes without that information, okay, we can't really proceed with a criminal offense on that person without somebody coming forward. Eventually, if you make an occurrence and we're going to go arrest somebody, eventually the information is going to come out either through disclosure at court, who had called, right? Or oftentimes if it's a neighbor dispute or some sort of assault or whatever, people are going to put 2 and 2 together. They're going to figure out, I know who's complaining about me, right? So sometimes it's our fault because we'll go up and we'll knock right on the door first, and the person's looking out the window, oh, we know George called on me, and then we go over to their house. We try to do things better. Oftentimes, we won't do that. Even our dispatchers are asking those questions now. Did you want to see the police about this, sir, or did you just want them to speak to the person with the noisy party or whatever it might be? And we'll respect those wishes, and we won't go over and knock on the complainant's door because they don't want to know that they were the one that called. They just want the noise to stop. So we are sensitive to those issues. Do we get it right all the time? Absolutely not. But we're trying. So there's a lot more we could talk about that, and I'm sure our officers here, myself or Warren or wherever, would love to be able to talk with you afterwards to flesh some of those things out. But did that answer some of your questions at least, or? Yeah? Okay, thanks.
We have, we hire somebody and we have basically 1 year to decide if we're going to keep them as an employee or not. It's a probationary period. So that's our opportunity, and we have given our training officers additional training and supervisors, and that's when all eyes are supposed to be on things, so we can take action and do proper evaluation, and maybe this isn't the right job for you. After that, it's very difficult to get rid of a police officer. It just is. But we have a year, so that's really important, that first year. And as far as your what happened at 41 Division, that shouldn't happen. And I think at the end it's dealt with, but there is some damage done to the trust and people that you share that story with versus an opportunity to have had a great interaction and encounter and build trust. So thanks for bringing that forward. It's something we need to do better, and it may or may not have been an intentional thing, but it sounds like you figured out that it probably was, and that's really unfortunate.
And Warren touched on something there as well when he talked about the probationary period for our officers, because you talked about the hiring piece, but he's right. We really have, well, it's less than a year really to decide whether this person is meant for this job and they're going to be a good police officer or they're not. What we used to do, we used to hire folks and they'd get assigned to a coach officer, and they'd go out with that coach officer and they'd answer radio calls. They go from radio call to radio call, write reports, do all the stuff people think police do, drive that white car around and respond to radio calls. There wasn't a heck of a lot of community engagement along the way. It's very busy out there, and other than the engagement they're doing at that radio call, which is usually somebody that's in crisis, they're not having their best day, they're not usually having, their house has been broken into, they've been robbed, they've been assaulted. It's not like, hey, how you feeling? They're not going to have that happy-go-lucky type, just pure engagement conversation. Doesn't really build a great foundation, okay, as they gain experience of how to talk and walk and engage with the community. So we have started now what we call, for every new recruit, it's called a community experience. So instead of that, and it should be longer, and I think we're looking at expanding it to, you know, instead of a week to months, this first start of their career. But before they ever answer a radio call, they go out with our neighborhood officers and they go into the areas in the division in which they're going to be serving, and they talk to the leaders in the community. Like in 43 Division, we've got an Indigenous community called Gabriel Dumont. So they'll go in there and they'll speak to some of the elders in that community to talk about their lived experience with policing, to talk about what they want to see in their community in a police officer, how they want to be spoken to, how they want to be engaged, what the issues are. And they go out and they engage with community leaders, individuals. I think our Black Consultative Committee came and spoke to them for probably a couple hours at our division to talk about their lived experiences and what the community wants to see. So that's a week-long program that we never did before. So that kind of gets their feet wet right off the bat before they're so busy answering those radio calls. They do some community engagement later on, about 10 weeks of it. But this is a really in-depth piece. And we're looking at expanding that as well. Because we know that if you can't engage respectfully, okay, thoughtfully with the community, customer service, good customer service, you're not going to be a good police officer, right? And that's something that we want to instill in them right from the start, that's just as important as getting to that radio call, is how you treat that person and understand how they want to be treated from the get-go.
Do you want to get to the mic?
Come on, King. Well, you're actually sore. That's right, I forgot.
Yeah. I have a question. What does the training look like? Because if you guys have a board that shows the Black people are over-policed and over-representative, who's doing the training? Are the people doing the training people that had run-ins with the criminal justice system? Or are they people that are just, you know, professionals flapping their jaws and collecting a paycheck?
Can I help answer?
Well, no, sure. Well, in 41 Division, so the new recruits arrive. They do undergo 6 months of training at police college.
No, but what kind? Like, what does the training look like?
Yeah. Yeah, so
sorry, King, sorry, James, just to clarify, are you talking about the training once they get, like, when they're first hired, or are you talking about, like, in general, training on anti-Black racism, fair and partial policing, anti-bias? Oh, okay. Who's delivering that? Do we have anybody from the college here tonight, or no? No?
I can help answer. I can help.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I wanted to jump in with that training piece. So thank you so much for asking that question, because for all of the new recruits now, there is a pilot program that was developed, and it really was developed out of many months and maybe even years of engaging with PACER committee, the BCCC, and ARAP around what kind of training do officers need to help them understand the systemic pieces and how to disrupt biases and how to really build the empathy and compassion when they do policing. And so the Fair and Unbiased Policing Program, it's going to be rolled out actually next week. And it's a 5-day course. All new recruits are going to be taking. We are starting, and there is a module within that program that is race-based data collection strategy. That's why I know a little bit about it. And part of that program is going to be intense 5 days. The new cohort that's coming in, this is the first training that they will get before they go to police college. So they're going to have an in-depth foundation, understanding the Black experience, Indigenous experience, understanding disabilities issues. There's a module for that. What does bystander intervention look like? Right, bystander allyship, the race-based data collection strategy, of course, and what the data is pointing us to, and to be aware of what the biases are. Understanding the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, right, like some of those equity, like those really foundational equity pieces. And we're going to, the college is also going to roll out this training for all new recruits going forward. And we're building in the yearly in-service training also refresher courses to understand the anti-Black racism in policing and what that looks like and the impacts on communities. And like the superintendent was saying, incorporating like scenario-based virtual training into that as well, so that people can recognize when their biases are being triggered and how to disrupt and slow down a situation, right? So that we're not letting those biases come into play in high stress situations, which is when we are most likely to lean on our existing biases. And so there's a lot of things that we're trying, and I understand that the college, with the dedicated equity, inclusion, human rights subject matter experts, working with community advisors and working with community members to really develop and make those trainings real. So yeah, and I'll pass it to you, Ad.
James off there, so sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so after, that's the 6 month of training of the course and all the police academy stuff. So the first week you arrive, you're assigned to, say, 41 Division here, which is our area. There's a community experience that Superintendent Ridzik alluded to. So before you even answer a radio call, there's 5 days that you're brought to all the different shelters. We also have an Indigenous shelter that all the new officers are brought to. So they introduce the support workers, the counselors, and the members that need the supports as well. So a lot of agencies are met within the community that they're going to be working. And that's your first week already, that you're being exposed to all these different cultures and these different support services. And then from then they're assigned, and then they begin their on-the-job training.
But the training is one thing, and to your point, we've been doing this kind of training long before we took these statistics. So, is it working? Isn't it working?
My only issue with certain things.
Here, I'll bring it.
The people online can't hear you, though, King. That's the thing, right? So it is.
No, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. My only issue is with the training. If somebody who hasn't had any run-ins with the police criminal justice system is doing the training, that's almost like a slap to the face to the civilians that actually do have run-ins with the police and actually know, how the police could do their job better, to a point where the public doesn't feel threatened every time that the police come and approach them.
Yeah, I think, go on.
No, I can't speak to the individual that is there. I can speak on the mental health side of things, that we do actually have. It's not somebody that oversees, Scarborough Health Network, their crisis or whatever. It's actually people with lived experience that have mental health issues that actually come in and talk about their engagements and interactions with police. Okay. I know we have our community advisory panel that is helping shape the training, what needs to be there. We do have, and if, I don't know if anybody here from the BCC has actually gone and spoken at the college, but I know some of our members from our youth advisory committee have actually gone and delivered messages and training and conversations with our recruits, and they actually go and on our annual training and talk, whether it's about LGBTQ issues, anti-Black racism, Indigenous issues, things like that. They actually go and speak there. And we do engage our members of our consultative committees to help out with that. But there are also people with real lived experiences that are coming in to the classroom and talking about that to our officers.
If I can just add, I'm one of the trainers at the college, and with lived experience, I know that talking about the community experience project, I'm the one who coordinated throughout the city, through all the divisions, and we ensure that the speakers, including Amadeus, including Yace, including Black Creek Community Health Center, including Patrick Shaw, a number of people have lived experiences that actually contribute to that, including coming into the college to actually guest lecture. I know the other thing is that the City of Toronto's Community Crisis Response unit has also talked about lived experiences within communities and where there's a high prevalence of violence and what things are being done. So we have included that lived experience, including the anti-Black racism training that the City of Toronto has for the last 5 years been able to ask community members about their lived experience around anti-Black racism, and also part of the mandate that we are responsible for as part of the 81 recommendation is to include anti-Black racism training and what that looks like for officers and understanding what that means as lived Black experience, but also the historical impact of both colonialism, anti-Blackness, as well as indigeneity, and looking at how the history of policing has an impact on both Black individual as well as Indigenous communities, and what it is that we're dealing with right now, and being able to address some of those disparities and also looking at those biases to be able to address those.
I will actually want to take the opportunity right now to ask us to just say a round of thank you to Roseanne Bailey, who's done an incredible work on organizing all of this together. Yes, you do. Thank you so much. I know we're walking into the World Cafe, where we're going to have subject matter experts. Are we doing that today?
Yes, we are, but I just wanted to see if there was any more questions in the audience. Oh, look at that.
Yes.
We wanted to be able to exhaust these questions and then kind of go into the cafe. So I would invite you to come to this microphone. So one over there, another person here, and then if you could actually start a line, we can start there. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you.
So she's going to go first, and then go ahead.
Thank you very much. Mine is not a question. I heard everything, although I'm also in another meeting, but I was listening, and I do believe that TPS wants change. And I also do believe in training the new officers. You're doing a whole lot of things, but on that, there need to be accountability. And that is the piece, I think, that's dropped all the time. We do the training, we give it, and all of that. But also, when the new officers graduated and come out, and they are partnered with corrupt ones who are already there and have all of this, it is hard for them to do what they have taught, what they were taught in school, in the college, and all of that, because it's a difficulty with whom they are teamed up with whom they've teamed up with, and they just have to go with it, because there is this brotherhood, this sisterhood in TPS, and we all know it. I've seen it, I've experienced it. So, and I do believe, like I said, you really are working for change, and I do believe you're training your officers differently. I do believe that. They're getting a lot of training and all the different things. But we still, in the midst, have some who still have their beliefs and who still have their old way of thinking, and it's in them. We all have biases, unconscious bias. We all do. I stand in here with my bias. We all have that. I'm not standing here saying that all of us here, we are non-biased. We all have it, whether conscious or unconscious. We do have it. But that is what I see happened when I am already have all these things in my, and you bring me this fresh blood. And that fresh blood is under me. It's what I do and what I say, even if they know, oh, Augusta, this isn't correct. This is not what you're supposed to do. You got to shut up and just do what I do. And that is the unfortunate piece that I have seen, I have experienced in my community, and have seen it and continue to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. If you want to stay with the mic in case you have any questions, I think that was very astute. Just work with me on this one because I want to answer your question. I'm very, very, very well aware of the culture for which you speak. Years and years ago when we started, it came, and you asked the same question about who's teaching now versus then, and to break it up into two things. When you talk about the culture of, we'll call it coach officers now, it would be naive for me to stand up and say that that hasn't been the process in the past. That there is a culture of we are police, we are strong, we are one, you do it our way, you come from the college, that doesn't make any sense, this is what we want to do. But that is a very, very old way of thinking. I'd almost call it archaic from what I've seen in the last, and I can talk about personally, in the last even, I'll go back 10 years. And maybe even more so. Because now we have a very stringent process in our selection process when it comes to picking a coach officer. And a coach officer is somebody on the service that we put a lot of respect and a lot of time into selecting this officer on who they are and what their demonstrated behavior has been. What their demonstrated behavior has been with the community, what their demonstrated behavior has been with each other, what the demonstrated behavior all around the service and what they do. Then that person, once we select them, goes on a training course, which is a period of time to continue to instill what we want them to be like, the service wants them to be like, to succeed with that people. I'm looking at 2 officers right now that were coach officers, that were with 43, outstanding individuals who are now neighborhood community officers. And they can stand up and tell you what they went through to become a coach officer, to guide the younger officers that come through. And not younger officers in age, but younger officers in service. So what you saw in the past, yes, that did exist. But I am happy to say that it is moving, and we're moving not at a slow pace. We can't move at a slow pace any longer. But we're moving at a pace that everybody can understand what it means to be a coach officer and to have pride in yourself in being a police officer. And that goes with the coaching, that goes with the lived experience, that goes with being in the community as one-on-one. And once they're selected and they go in that course and they come back, they're with those officers for a period of time. And then they switch to another officer that has gone through the same experiences of being a coach officer, of worthy of being in the Toronto Police Service, and even more so, being worthy of being in the community. So that they're there to understand what the community's needs are, and they're there to listen to the community. And they already have listened to the community through their demonstrated behavior. So does that kind of address what you're looking at? That way of thinking, it did exist in the past. It absolutely did. No, but it's not. It's unfortunate in the sense that it did exist, but it's very fortunate because we got to learn from it. And we get to learn from it from you. Sorry to cut you off. We get to learn from it, especially from the people in the community with the lived experiences that bring all that to show us what we want to demonstrate, what we want to bring to the college, to teach them what we want in the coach officers in that selection process as well.
I think there's vagueness, though. Like, I think to answer the question is, like, what kind of training specifically? I mean, we're talking about being selected and the quality of selection because they were selected, but what goes in specifically in selecting that coach? What are the qualities that you're looking for? What are the training process? Like in a little bit of detail, a little bit of illustration so that it matches a little bit or addresses her issue.
Someone can call it.
Well, I can tell you one of the main things that goes into one of the big emphasis is their involvement in their past experience as an officer with the community. And Roger was talking about when he came on the job. When I came on the job, the coach officer was one person. They weren't really designated as a coach officer. It was almost like a job for them because they got the new recruit, and it was, shut up, kid. Don't touch that computer, don't touch the radio, and don't put anything in your book until I tell you. That's what you heard. Peter's laughing over there. That's the old way of doing things. And I'll say one thing, too. We've changed that. We recognize that was the old way of doing things, and it's evolved over the years, but I think we've gone leaps and bounds in the last probably 5 years, but more specifically probably in the last 2 years, with the amount of effort that we put into picking that right person for that job. The training they get when they go to the college, a coach officer years ago never got any training. They're just like, oh, they're the senior guy, or you're the on the totem pole, you get the new recruit, go have fun. Now it's recognized as a position, okay? They actually are compensated for it. And the training they get is far more than what they used to get. So that includes a lot of what we're talking about, King, the anti-black racism piece, fair and impartial policing, a lot of talk and conversation about those conscious and unconscious biases, things like that, because they're the ones that really are going to be, the coach officer, I mean, the ones that are going to be able to pick out and evaluate this new officer. Are they going to be a good fit for us? And that's so important for us because we don't have a lot of time to figure that out. So it's important to have that right coach officer in that place. And I think it says something that we've got a couple of previous coach officers here that were also selected, which would even be just as stringent, to make good neighborhood officers. Because they've shown throughout their career they can build relationships with the community. They do show empathy, okay? They can have those tough conversations with community members. And they've done them in the past and worked closely with the community, and they can impart that on to the new officers as well. We recognize that. We failed in the past with sticking them in a car and answering radio calls for 4 years, right? Without giving them that opportunity to engage with the community. That's why it's important with our neighborhood officers to have that as well.
I just quickly want to add too, and it's been said, we can provide people with training, we can give them the right way to do things, we can try to screen out people that shouldn't be, we can do all of those things, but at the end of the day, we have what we have driving around in police cars right now. So I want you to, we have processes in place to have accountability and to ensure people when they go the wrong way and they do the wrong things, if we know about it, we can take action. So that's, this driving change graphic here is, it's connected. They're all part of it. They're all working together at the same time. So things like body-worn camera is a great opportunity for supervisors to observe an interaction with somebody, with a member of the public, whether it's a vehicle stop or a radio call, they're required to have that on. And we're getting better at that. But the role of supervisors, ensuring people do their jobs properly and treat people the right way, it's critical. It just is. So this is, I just want to emphasize that all of these things, these 38 action items, they're all part of getting us where we need to go.
I see we have someone at the mic.
Good evening. My question is, so it sounds like a lot of these new recruits, they get the anti-Black racism training and the equity training, but what about your existing officers?
Before you answer her question, which kind of goes along with what I'm about to say. First of all, congratulations on your growth and how far you've come. However, I sat here and listened to you speak about your training. What I didn't hear is any training pertaining to the inside. You're training on the outside, but you're not training the inner man. If you don't train the inner man, you are digressing, right? I look at your, what do you call this? I look at your charts, right? I see Black people and I see white people. All the other people are Middle Eastern, Indigenous, Latinos, and so forth. You need to change that dynamics for the simple reason that Black and white, or light and dark, had to coexist, right? Creation or life began in the dark. Light was called forth out of the dark, right? So if you're going to continue this debate and training with race, we have to first get rid of the color. We have to get rid of that color talk between Black people and white people. Light and dark must coexist in order for the universe to survive. So we have to get the talk correct, right? We're not color, we are people. They're Caucasian people, and we are Nubian people or Afro-Canadian people, okay? We can't continue to become too comfortable with the color division, right? Fear, envy, and distrust is what we were taught as a nation, as a people worldwide. So in order to correct that, we first need to start looking at each other as people, not as color. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. We mentioned the training for the new recruits, and there are yearly trainings for all existing members. So every year, and the officers here can expand on what the in-service training looks like, but every year all officers have to get recertified go through a 1 or 2 days, is it 2 days? 3 days of training. And part of that training includes understanding the experiences of diverse communities, including lived experiences of Black communities and lived experiences of Indigenous communities in Toronto. And so building that empathy, that understanding, that valuing and compassionate approach to knowing what our communities are going through in Toronto is part of making that connection, humanizing everybody that you're speaking of. And I absolutely agree. And one of the things, often Martin Luther King's, famous speech, I have a dream, right? That someday, we will not see color. And that's what we all strive for. And until we get to that date, though, we need to recognize and acknowledge the systemic barriers and the systemic inequities that continue to harm our communities and impact us in different ways, and so that we can correct it. And so we're moving towards that day where where it doesn't matter anymore, right? Where those color divides and those racial divides won't matter anymore, but we're not there yet, right? We need to be attentive. We need to be ever more mindful of the things that we bring into a situation, and mindful of how our biases continue to drive, whether it's gender bias, right? Preferences for, or prejudices against people with certain disabilities, right? We have to be, attentive to these things so that we can disrupt it, and so that someday those things no longer matter, and we can all be treat each other as humans. And I think that in inner work that you're talking about, we also, part of the training, also talking to officers about how to recognize the harm and the trauma that they bring into the job, right? Recognizing PTSD and mental health are really real serious concerns, and that impact officers as well.
I see someone at the mic at the back.
Oh, sorry, I think he's ahead of me.
Okay, great.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm a resident of 43 Division, and I'm representing a lot of the questions I have. I have 3 questions, and they're from. Sorry? But you can ask one. I can ask only one? Yeah. Okay. You can come back after. All right. Okay. So, this is a tough one because it's from people in the community that have reached out and actually asked me to ask questions. But I'll ask the first one. So the first one's, again, I don't mean to drag this point on, but on training. And specifically, Maya, you had mentioned about these new programs that are being implemented at college and even ongoing for officers. So I think the question's more about, in the corporate world, we've seen a lot of training take place. And, some of them are mandatory, and so executives will go, they'll sit there, they'll listen to training, okay, thank you, and they leave. And so even at that training, are there any checks and balances in place to make sure that officers understand what's being taught, and are they evaluated on it? So, is there a round table discussion after that, where each officer kind of talks about what they've learned, and are there supervisors listening to that and going, okay, they did understand, or they didn't, and they need more training? So it's not just to check the box, we've done training, but yes, in practice, it seems like they've, viscerally understood it.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because that's an ongoing conversation that we have with the community advisory panel, both for the race-based data collection strategy and how do we ensure that officers really get what they're being taught, and also at the college. And we work with the equity, inclusion, and human rights trainers at the college, our unit does. Roseanne's involved in a lot of it, and so am I, and other members of our team. And that's one of the things that's, the evaluation piece, and also incorporating, because there's different learners, right? We all learn differently. And so how do we, diversify the way we deliver material so that people can really, it fits with different learners' needs, and they can grasp it. Right, and so that's scenario-based training, case studies, putting things into action, having those discussions and inner reflection exercises into training. And, we try to build as much as we can into each of the modules that we deliver. And the challenge is always that we run out of time, right? There's only limited time to do certain things. And so we do what we can within the time that we have with officers. They get so much training. And we also are working to improve the way we evaluate. We hadn't done a good job. I don't know if you're familiar with the Kirkpatrick model of training evaluation. Oftentimes it's level 1, right? Did you complete this training? Right. Yes, no, right? And so we're really trying to move beyond level 1 of the Kirkpatrick model to get to, did you get the content, right? So doing knowledge checks, reflecting on change behaviors. Did your knowledge lead to you doing things differently, right? And seeing the change in behaviors that we want to see. And then, the other levels, like, was this training effective, and what were the outcomes, and how do we track those outcomes over the long term, right? And so then we start to get to know whether we are delivering the right training at the right time, in the right places to the right officers when they need it. And that gets a little bit more trickier, but that's definitely an area that we want to improve, and we're continuously having conversations around.
And if I could just add to that, the way we've done training has changed, evolved over the years to be a lot more interactive. I mean, day is gone where you flip the microfiche on and everybody sits there and looks at the slide and the instructor reads off the slide and you're like falling asleep and chewing gum to try to stay awake. It's a lot more interactive, right? So a lot of breakout sessions, a lot of scenario-based type training things, a lot of debriefs take place after that. Why did you do that? Why did you pull your gun out on that, or why did you decide that you needed to use force in this particular case? Why did you arrest that person at that point in time? And they debrief everybody's actions, and everybody gets to learn from it. So there's a lot more interactive training like that that everybody can benefit from, right, as well. And the second thing I want to talk about was, and it should be coming back, because I've heard a lot of talk about training and what do the police do and why we do it. So I was involved in starting up our community police academy probably about 5 years ago. It obviously got shut down because of COVID, but what that was bringing the community in, and we had a class of 35 to 40. You had to apply to go into it, and we took a great cross-section of applicants from across the entire city, young, old, female, male, LGBTQ, black, white, Asian, whatever. Just a good cross-section from all different communities across the city. It started out as 8 weeks, and because of the feedback we had, we expanded it to 9 weeks long, not 9 weeks in a row, but a Saturday. So 9 Saturdays in a row, 8 hours, okay, of training. And all it was to introduce the community to what we do, how we do it, why we do it. Here's the training we receive. They participated in scenarios, which was very, very impactful. And they had some really tough discussions there about what we do and how we do it and why we do it. But I can tell you, and it wasn't just, quote, people that loved the police and wanted to come there and wanted to become police officers. We purposely screened people out that wanted to be police officers per se. We wanted to be able to have those difficult conversations with people about what they were experiencing in the community and their lived experiences. And there were some challenging conversations there. But what I can say, we did one of the important things I wanted to do was have a pre-survey of their what they believed the role of policing was, what training we got and things like that. And then once they finished, a post-survey. And the difference between the two after they had received that training was incredible. And we had some people that were very critical of us at the start, still critical of us at the end, but had a great understanding of what we did and how we did it and why we did it. And they were to take that back to their community and talk about it. So I encourage you all to keep an eye out for that. It'll get advertised. We'll probably do a press conference if it gets started back up. But it is, if you are interested in hearing about what we do, why we do it, and how we do it, and basically taking part in some of the training our officers actually get, particularly the scenarios, putting yourself in, you've got the fake gun on and you're going, we've got actors and everything there, very, very impactful. So I'd encourage you to take part in that as well.
So sorry, I just want to say I'm a graduate from that. I did that about 3 years ago before I even joined the service. So it is actually really good. So I'm going to go to the next question.
Yeah. Sorry, I chuckle. I know Roseanne. She's awesome. I actually do have two questions, but one is, I know, but okay. Here's the thing. One question is from the young lady back there, and I don't think actually that question was addressed directly. So I'm going to ask it for her again, and then I'll get to my question, which sort of ties in. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it was, what are you guys doing about the bad apples now? Was that it? Okay. Is that right? Who exists now? Who are out there driving the cars right now,
Yeah.
hassling Hasidic Jews and so on, or whatever they're doing?
Right. So I think I will answer that question. I think your question was the training we've talked about for new officers to senior officers that are already hired, do they get that training? Yes. And I think Doctor spoke a little bit about the 3-day mandatory training, plus we have a lot of other mandatory training. So that training is happening for every frontline police officer. So your question about what we do with people that are out there that are working now.
Her question. Yeah.
Her question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is what I was saying. We have these processes in place. We have, there's levels of supervision and people reviewing reports, people reviewing in-car camera, people reviewing body worn. I mean, that's a piece of what we're doing, and this happens. It does happen as an ongoing part of a responsibility of supervisors doing things. And when they see something that's not right, they may have a conversation with the officer, review the video that they saw with the officer, or if it's something that is sort of misconduct, they'll initiate a discipline process, which would start and be investigated, and then could be, a penalty, could be training, could be reprimand, they could lose hours, could be a tribunal matter. So there's the discipline process that comes out of those sort of accountability pieces we have. And then we have the OIPRD complaint process, where we are advised, if a public complaint from someone had an interaction or something, or a third party, they make a complaint through the OIP, that gets assigned and gets investigated. I mean, that's kind of what we have. We have frontline supervisors. We are made aware of incidents that happen, however that might be, and reviews of things like that. That's kind of where it starts for us.
Right.
We also have a process where if officers are involved in a number of different things, we track it. And it's a system called PSIS, Police Professional Standards Information System. So it just gives us, there's thresholds that are set for what the peers are doing in a division that may be involved. And I don't know the numbers, but it's all kinds of different things. Use of force, public complaints, departmental crashes where they're driving, all kinds of things that are things that should be looked at. And when they meet a threshold, it comes back to the unit commander, and they go, okay, this Wilson guy, he did this and this. So it may be a conversation that we have. For sure, that's at the very least, things like that. So there are a number of things in place to do these things. But anyway, that's kind of to answer her question, and a little bit about the training and a little bit about that oversight.
So as timekeeper, I'm going to do a rapid fire, meaning 1 minute for a question, 1 minute for answers. Only because we still have another section that we have to get to that's been shortened already. So 1 minute.
That's impossible for me, Roseanne, I think.
After me. All right, geez. All right. Okay, thank you for that, because that does kind of tie into my question, which is about feedback loop. And I apologize. I got in here late, hustled here after work as quick as I could. And maybe you have already sort of spoken to that driving change thing, but I glance at it, I stare at it, and I don't see stuff around consequences. Now, you talked to process. I'm a little bit aware of, I know a couple folks who've been involved in police tribunal types of things and so on and so forth. I don't know all the details, but the long and short of it sort of feels like there's not a lot of when we say accountability, there's not a lot that actually gets done. There's a process and so on, and it sort of feels like mostly a formality. So we have stats now, great, and we have this training, fantastic. I know her. I know the training is awesome, great, but there's a momentum when it comes to culture, and at the end of the day, how do you, when you look at the stats again and you see some folks out there who are way off base, like we, for example, I'm going to go off to a tangent. Doctors, if you have a really bad doctor, they're like botching all the surgeries and whatnot, they get turfed out. Right, so I'm just sort of feeling like, where's the accountability against the union, the U word, around getting out folks who are way off base? All the things that you mentioned, the complaints, recordings, reviews, process is fine, but can you actually get rid of folks who aren't doing so good? What's the feedback loop?
Has someone been fired? Sorry. Over this?
Yes. So
well,
I mean,
lots been fired.
What's that?
Well, okay, sorry. There's
a two-tiered answer to that, right? If it's criminal, it's criminal, right? I mean, we're not immune to that. I mean, we go through the same process as any citizen would if they got arrested. We're charged criminally. The officer would usually get suspended, and the chief has the ultimate decision to whether or not they are going to keep them off suspension. Okay, and the bone of contention now is they're off on suspension with pay until they're proven guilty. Which I guess in the way our rule of law is, you are innocent until proven guilty. But I can tell you, so on that aspect there, the chiefs of police, we have an Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, are really pushing forward to be able to suspend somebody without pay. Okay, under certain circumstances, and I believe there are the ability to do that now is there in a small little window, but they're looking to expand that because they realize that the public's watching, right? This person's gone out there and they're an impaired driver, they've smashed their car up, or they've robbed a bank, or whatever it might be, yet they're suspended with pay. Right? So they're looking, our own internal, the chiefs of police are looking at changing that because they recognize that's a problem. Serious matters, whether they're criminal or internal, the internal piece go down to our tribunal, okay, which is our own internal court process. We do have outside prosecutors coming in now to adjudicate some of those things. That becomes a public record. When it goes down there, whatever the punishment may be, a demotion in class from first class or a demotion in rank, whatever, that gets published. That's a public document. When it's a less serious matter at a divisional level.
Yeah, let's just say it's like carding. Like, there's a bunch of cops who just love to card people just walking down the street.
Well, I will talk to that as too. Whatever. Like, again, that's very broad, right? Depends on what's going on. But what we've added into that too, and Roseanne could probably talk to it, is every single complaint that comes in that has any hint of an equity inclusion type lens, human rights lens to it, has to be vetted through their office now, our equity inclusion office, of which we have a lawyer there as well that specializes in human rights law. And they review every single one of them, and they come forward with recommendations. I know I'm way over the minute. I'm sorry.
Okay, so yes, so there's a process, and that's great. I'm saying consequences. Like if there's for all the cops, if you had a chart, like most of them are going to sort of fall along a line, but there's going to be outliers, say, right? I'm just saying, and you don't have to put a name on it. If it says badge number 4, 5, 7, whatever, is like way off base or something like that. Can that person still get promoted? Will that person get canned? Like what's consequences really is the thing I'm looking at. And again, it talks to culture of union.
Yeah.
Process is great, but
right.
It's got to have teeth.
I know. I see what you're getting at, and I don't know if I have a great answer, unfortunately, because a lot of our discipline that's substantiated, there are already recommended penalties that are applied. So our professional standards unit have worked, some of it comes from the Police Services Act, and penalty is handed out. But it's progressive. So, things get more serious. Someone could do 3 things that they shouldn't have been doing, and they may end up down at a tribunal because it's that 3rd thing. But the consequence piece, there's a personal file that, people that want to look at competing to be in another position or a transfer or another job, that file will keep misconduct that's substantiated for 2 years. And if there's something that happens within that, it all continues for a couple of years. So it's, as a unit commander, I deal with this. This is what we do. We get it and we look at it and we assess it. And we're trying to find the bad apples. And this is why it's important that we work together and we learn about experiences. And to your point about this cycle here, it's all these different parts that hopefully will help us to do that. But we have a discipline process. We have a separate professional standards unit that does things, that do these investigations if they're serious. And we do have progressive discipline. So there are consequences, but I think what you think is you're not wrong. It's very difficult for us to get rid of somebody that is a problem. It really just is.
We have fired people, but it does not happen very often.
Yeah.
And
It's
it's on
very
the severe end of the spectrum.
I think the body-worn camera will give us a greater ability to do these things.
We've got a question on the side.
1 minute, okay. Roseanne has me on the clock. Good evening, everyone. Ani. I am the BCCC liaison with 41 Division. I'm also the business development for our community group, our executive group. And my question comes from actually one of my Indigenous counterparts. Special miigwech to Inspector Hung for taking the new recruits to the Indigenous shelter. But he is asking me to ask the question on his behalf, what happens in terms of, and I guess it's training kind of related, but in terms of understanding the religious symbolisms across, because religious symbolisms kind of tie us in across culture and across race. And in terms of officers understanding even, simple Anishinaabe words are ani for hello, miigwech for thank you, bamapi for thank you, see you next time, my friend. And what some individuals are experiencing, Indigenous and across the board, is that there are cultural misinformations or no informations. So in the case of someone having tobacco is a sacred thing that an Indigenous person would have, and it's usually tied in a red piece of cloth, and it's holy tobacco, like holy water, and there's been situations, unfortunately, where it's being claim that it's something else other than that, as opposed, there's like another culture, another religion would wear the sword because there's a cultural, religious attachment to it. So in terms of all the data and all the information, where does the religious symbolisms come into play? Because I don't know if many people know that if you see a purple and blue ribbon tied anywhere, across Canada, across the province, it means that an Indigenous person has died and the Indigenous community within that area is mourning. So in terms of, it's another layer, but it's a layer that ties all of the communities, the racial communities, the cultures across. It's a mutual meeting ground. So that's the question. Where does that fall into play?
I think where that lies, to let you know, our training with that and with the college itself does an enormous amount of work in understanding each and every community they're in. But this is where we would rely on the person asking the question there and bringing that forward to either the neighborhood officers, bringing it forward to the station, bringing it forward to me as an inspector of division. If you have something that is in your community that you believe it's something that the officer should know and we don't know it, we would ask you to please bring it to our attention where we could do the right due diligence. So we do by the community the proper way, so we do it the right way every single time, have that conversation, and then be able to do that training and pay it forward to everybody else. So we would need your help in that to understand that. I'm not going to tell you that we are a professional at every learning that we have, but it's very important that things like that, bring it forward to us. We will absolutely bring it to the college, and if it warrants enough information that we have, at least to bring it into our training, we will do that. And that's our commitment to the community.
Thank you.
And I'll add that that's part of the in understanding Indigenous experiences. There is built into that course, that training that every officer receives every year, an understanding of Indigenous cultures, Indigenous, like for example, avoidance of eye contact. That's a cultural thing, right? It means respect. And building that kind of understanding of our Indigenous communities, which are very diverse. Within Toronto, and there's always more to do. And I know Roseanne was part of developing training around search procedures, understanding the meaning of medicine pouches and, and tobacco and sacred items that persons being searched may have on them, and how to treat those items respectfully, to recognize them, first of all, right? And to ask the right questions so that we are not inadvertently causing more harm in how we handle those searches and the items that those persons may have. So that, we are trying, like Roger was saying, to incorporate those things in the training, and there's always more to do. Yeah.
And like Dr. Pham was saying earlier, it's a matter of time, too. It's just time constraints. This community experiences this week, and before Superintendent Rizzi interrupted me, there's a gang exit person as well that was involved in gangs, and that counsels the officers as well. So there's someone that's through the criminal justice system, but yeah, it is just that an exposure so that officers get some awareness. Will they become experts? Probably not, but we do have Indigenous liaison officers that officers can liaise with for more information. We have Muslim liaison officers as well that, if officers need to reach out to need more information, they can do that as well.
Thank you.
I think one of the things we're seeing now too, as we become more reflective of the community that we serve, that a lot of that training, lived experience is coming actually from officer to officer every single day, right? So we have Indigenous officers that are working with that are new recruits and things like that. We have officers that are really reflective of our community, and those discussions happen in the car every single day, and they learn from each other.
Thank you so much for the engaging conversation. So I'm going to have a bit of a breakout. So there are tables. I'm going to ask the people in the room to join the tables. For the people who are online, there's going to be a facilitator that will do a whiteboard session. And then what we're going to do is going to come back. So if you're not at a table and you're seated, if I can just get you to just join a table, there are questions as well as themes at the tables that we're going to just ask you for that. We're not going to switch anybody around. We're just going to have you answer some of those questions. Okay. We're going to do 15 minutes and then come back and then just close out.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Just one moment while we check that the audio is working to make sure that everyone at home can hear me. We're just making sure that the audio is working so everyone at home can hear me. Just one moment while we check that the audio is working to make sure that everyone at home can. Okay, awesome. So we are a go. So good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the 2022 Race and Identity-Based Data Town Hall session. As mentioned live, here we'll be sharing with you what we're doing to drive change and how we are moving forward. We are seeking input from you to provide feedback on the 38 action items put forward to address the outcomes of the 2020 Use of Force and Strip Search Report and continuously improve. There will be 3 themes that I will walk you through within the next 15 minutes in total. So we'll spend about 5 minutes maximum on each theme. And I will ask that you please put your questions and your comments and your feedback regarding any of the action items that you will see on the screen in the YouTube chat. I have been monitoring throughout this entire evening, so I will get us started by posting some of the feedback that I've seen in it, and I will give you the opportunity to post some more. If you have additional feedback, please scan the QR code to the left or email equityinclusion@torontopolice.on.ca. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here on the QR code and give everybody an opportunity to scan your screen, and it will take you to the race-based data collection community survey. So that's just the QR code right here. And again, the email is equityinclusion@torontopolice.on.ca. So any feedback or questions that don't get captured this evening, please feel free to email us there. Thank you again for sharing your perspectives and your lived experiences. And we will get started with the first theme of the evening. So theme 1 is about governance, procedures, and workflow. And this theme relates to police accountability, auditing, procedures, and processes. So as you can see here, there are some action items that have already been complete, and then we have action items that we require your feedback this evening. So I will focus on the action items for feedback since we are a bit tight on the time. So I will read them out loud. The action items for feedback are the following: review of non-emergency calls to divert to alternative service providers, develop a Toronto Police Service equity strategy, review committees for use of force and strip searches to include EDI representatives, and improve identification of risk, non-compliance, and assessment of root causes through an audit supervisor at each division. So what we're hoping and what I'm looking for in the chat is any comments or feedback that you have on these action items specifically, especially what do you believe is missing or something that needs to be changed or improved upon? Is there something else that we should be adding as an action item for the governance theme? So I will get us started. There were a couple of comments. So I'm just going to use different sticky notes for comments and questions, and we'll spend about 5 minutes on this. Okay. So one of the comments that we received earlier in the chat was regarding procedures on the needs of disability issues. So I'm posting that here. Okay, and another comment from earlier this evening that we saw in the chat is regarding consequences and how we need real consequences to members set out in procedures. Okay, so we'll spend a couple more minutes on this theme. And again, I encourage you to provide us with any input or feedback or questions regarding these action items. So I will read them out loud again. Review of non-emergency calls to divert alternative service providers, develop a Toronto Police Service equity strategy, review committees for use of force and strip searches to include equity, diversity, and inclusion representatives, and improve identification of risk, non-compliance, and assessment of root causes through an audit supervisor at each division. Okay, so we'll spend about a minute more here, and then we'll move on to theme number 2. And I will mention at this time that you'll see above in the green box here, 4 of the action items have already been complete, and they are review of in-car camera and body-worn camera for all use of force incidents, improve auditing at management level for strip searches, and change use of force procedure and improve reporting on use of force and strip searches. Okay, so I'm going to move on to theme 2, which is regarding training, excuse me, and education. This theme relates to improving member training to include an equity focus. So once again, we have several action items that have already been complete up here at the top, but our focus and ask this evening is if we can get some feedback, input, and questions in regards to the in-progress action items on this theme. And they are the following: implement fair and impartial policing course, community and academic review of training curriculum, adverse childhood experience, ACE training for all officers, enhanced coach officer training course, active bystandership course, specialized training for crime analysts and 911 call takers, and revised probationary constable program to ensure community experience. So we'll spend a few minutes on this theme, so please feel free to put in more of your comments, questions, and feedback regarding these action items. And in the meantime, I will start by posting what was earlier mentioned in our chat. Right, so one of the comments that we received earlier is members of the community being added within our training, incorporating lived experiences from the community in the training. We have a question that was brought forward. I'm going to use a different sticky note here in blue. Okay, and that question is there a clear understanding of what are the needs of disability issues to new recruits? Okay, just going to keep going. We have another comment. Recruitment process, prior knowledge of issues, lived experiences are important. Okay. Another question that we received earlier. Okay. What does training look like for existing members? Thank you for that. Right, so we have about 5 minutes before going back to the live town hall. I'm just going to add one more comment here that's come through. Okay. Volunteering is highly important. Okay, so for the last few minutes, I'm just going to move us forward to the final theme of the night, which is about monitoring. And this theme relates to monitoring and transparent evaluation to make sure we are accountable. So once again, the action items for feedback this evening are the following. I'll zoom in a bit. Measure race and other points of police contact, collect member diversity and demographic data, develop a post-interaction survey with communities, analyze other outcomes for arrested persons, including diversions, booking, protective, and frisk searches, assess equity impacts for crime management plans, revise officer performance reports to include a community focus, including referrals and diversions, review existing corporate risk management report to include non-race information on use of force reports, and conduct multi-year analysis on use of force and strip searches to assess the actions and changes we are making. So we have about 3 minutes before we get sent back to the live town hall. Just looking at the chat, I encourage you to put your comments, feedback, or questions regarding any of the following action items for this theme. I have a couple here that I noticed in the chat earlier. So we have a question. Just going to use our blue sticky notes. Post-training, there's still a cultural problem with attitudes of coach officers. How are their behaviors monitored? Picking the right fit. And we have one more. one more question here. Okay. Consequences. What does accountability actually look like? It feels more like a formality than real accountability. Where is the accountability against the union? Thank you for that. Okay, so we have about 2 more minutes before we go back to the live town hall. Please feel free to put in any comments, questions, or suggestions, particularly if you feel any action items are missing that you believe should be a part of it. Let us know. Okay. All right, so I will take us back to the beginning. All right, so just before we go back live, once again, I just want to remind you of the QR code here. So I will zoom in. Please make sure that you scan it using your phones, and it will take you to the race-based data collection community survey where you can provide us with your feedback. All right, and also as a reminder, our email address, if you didn't have a chance to provide us with your comments, questions, or concerns this evening, please feel free to send us an email at equityinclusion@torontopolice.on.ca. And before you get sent back, I just want to thank you again for sharing your perspectives and your lived experiences this evening. Have a great one.
Hello. I'm just going to bring everybody back. I know there's some really great conversations. So good evening, all. I just want to bring us back. Amazing conversations, and I promise you that after we kind of close out and we are able to shut down our YouTube live streaming, you can continue your conversation as we clean up. So I just wanted to bring this to a bit of a close. We wanted to a bit of a share back. We can't actually do that just because we promised a closure by around 8:30. But I would like the panel to just close off, and then I'm going to ask Scarborough Centre for Healthy Communities just to close out for the night. And as I said, for the people in the room, there's still opportunities to have those discussions and to be able to kind of bring your final thoughts to the tables that you're sitting at. So, Claudia, I'm going to bring it back to you.
Okay, well, welcome back. Hopefully you had wonderful conversations. Thank you so much for coming out. But I'm going to have each one of the panelists here, just to say closing and before we leave, we're just getting started, right?
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And I just want you all to know that we started with phase 1. I mentioned use of force strip searches was an important area to start, but we're not stopping there, right? We know that there's a lot more to understand. There's a lot of data gaps that we need to dig deeper into to understand why these disparities exist and how we can really concretely drive change. And for the next phase, phase 2, we're going into understanding arrests and release decisions, diversions, especially for our youth. How are we supporting our youth? And we really heard that last night when we had our youth town hall, right? We're going into mental health apprehensions, understanding the intersection between policing and child welfare, and our part in that process to better support vulnerable families. So we're not stopping here. We're going to keep going, and I'm really excited to continue to work with communities, with our officers on this piece, and I think it's vitally important. So that's my piece.
And for me, just thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you, the neighborhood community officers, for coming out and engaging with you folks as well. Hopefully there's some few things that we can all take away from this. Nothing is ever going to be perfect, but I think if we keep working at it and keep working together, we can come to something.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just add to that. This has been a great start, and we are really committed to this, to doing better, to listening, and to making real change. So we are at our best when we do things, as a team, as a group, and that really includes the community more than anything. So I'm really encouraged. 41 Division, right there. I'd love to continue some of these conversations. But thank you, and thank you to everyone that took the time to come out tonight. And it's just say we have some amazing officers, and some of them were here tonight, that are out there that really do great work. And but we can do better. We know that, and we have some that aren't that we need to deal with. But we're really on the right track. So thanks.
Not much more to say, other than please. I've attended so many. Not race-based data meetings over the years, but community meetings, town halls. Please do not let the conversation stop here. You came out here for a reason tonight, and thank you for that, being a voice of your community. Our officers are willing to talk after here. We've got our list of officers with their contact information. I've got my cards here if anyone wants to have a conversation after or in a few days or weeks or whatever. But don't let the conversation stop here. Okay, there's a reason why all of you came out here, because you care about your communities, you're engaged, and you want to work with us, and we do want to work with you. We want to be better. We can't be better without your help. So please don't let that conversation stop here. We're always willing to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Stay engaged. As Superintendent Ridzik said, it's important. There's been many town halls this year, and there's going to be many next year. So come, enjoy yourselves, but ask the questions, and take our cards, as Superintendent Ridzik said, and they're very good questions, and don't hold back, because this is where you're going to get the answers. So thank you very much, everybody.
I think there are 2 community hosts here. Would you like to come to the mic?
We're one.
Okay.
We just have so many locations. Thank you all for coming. Like I say, my name is Shola Alabi, and I'm part of the beginning of this conversation. This hub has been here for so many years, and it's a space for us to have conversation. For me, it is important that this is not just a moment, but a movement to make sure we have accountability. And it's in the conversation that we can make our voices heard and be able to tell the police or system in place that this is what the people would like to see, and then we hold them accountable. Again, this is part of Scarborough Center for Healthy Communities. We have about 11 locations, and this hub especially has so many services within this hub, and it's a place for engagement. Before COVID, you would see like 200 people in this place at a time. So we want to open up that. We're back, and would like you to come in and use this space to facilitate this kind of conversation. Thank you very much for coming.
I want to wish you guys a wonderful evening. Be safe. We will see, hopefully, some of you in the new year. And this has been a wonderful conversation and the beginning of collaboration. Have yourself a wonderful evening.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wait, what's going on?
The only thing I wanted to say is next time, could you guys bring like the Crown attorneys? Because those are the ones that are setting out the unjust punishments for the crimes that are being committed. So, I know you guys get all the smoke because you guys have to bring the people into the station, but the real smoke should be with the Crown attorneys as well as John Tory. So, next time it would be good to actually have a Crown attorney and John Tory to actually get people that's been in the system to say this is how it affected me, so they could get a real human view of who they're sentencing. That's it.
Yeah, that's good. Really good.
Good evening. Thank you. Good night.